D&D Beyond has released a new alpha feature called Maps. But what exactly is it? How do you use it? And how does it differ from the 3D virtual tabletop that they'll be releasing later? We'll get into all that and more in today's video. I'm Dave.
And I'm Cody.
And this is the one and only RPG Rundown. Let's talk about virtual tabletops first, or VTTs. As you may know, they're simply a way to play with other players remotely, regardless of where you are, over the computer, and they provide the maps and minis and different things that you need visually to play the game.
Like Roll20, Foundry, and Fantasy Grounds are some popular ones you might have heard of.
And D&D Beyond Maps is another form of a virtual tabletop. It's a more traditional one, like Roll20, in that it's got that flat look on the screen with the tokens. It looks pretty much like any paper map you might bust out at a traditional D&D game. And that's different from the more full-blown 3D VTT that they've been developing at D&D Beyond, which we've seen a lot of marketing and previews for. That one looks a little bit more like a video game, kind of wants to do everything for you, a little less theater of mind. Here's how it works. First, you need to have a D&D Beyond campaign set up. Then you can create a map. You can create several maps in the same campaign and switch between them. You can create a map by uploading one, or by choosing a pre-provided map from D&D Beyond. You load monsters by pulling them out of this bar on the left. There's also a little chat-like log, but it's not actually chat. It will bring over actions that happen on a D&D Beyond character sheet. For example, if someone rolls dice, it'll put that dice roll right in the chat window. And in this area, you can see an invite link. This is what you send to your players to get them into the map. Without this, it's a little tricky. And this is important because there's really no other way for your players to get into the game. This link does not show up when they look at the campaign in their browser. So, how does D&D Beyond compare to its competitor VTTs? Let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages as we see them. So obviously, a big advantage is the integration with D&D Beyond content. If you have a master tier subscription to D&D Beyond, then any digital content you own, like an adventure module, is already available in D&D Beyond Maps. So you pay once and you've got it.
So it provides a really nice all-in-one place. You only have to buy it in one spot versus where some people are buying it both on D&D Beyond and also on Roll20. You get all the same content. You could argue that it's also on Roll20, but, you know, all in one spot. Your character builders, you create your sheets on here. You don't have to do anything in between or potentially purchase anything twice.
True. And for my money, the character builder in D&D Beyond has no competitor. It's the best one. If you've ever tried to use something like the Roll20 D&D character builder, it's not quite as good.
Yeah, what I've done in the past is I've used the character builder on D&D Beyond and then transferred everything into Roll20, so this is just a step in the right direction to eliminate having to do something like that.
Very true. Pro tip, there is a plugin called Beyond 20 that you can download for Chrome or Firefox, and it will take roles from your D&D Beyond character sheet and put them in the chat log of Roll20, which is nice. And I imagine the other VTTs may have solutions like that too.
Yeah, that's a good solution. I've seen a lot of positive feedback on that one, and I believe it's really nice as well. But just coming from a beginner's standpoint, you know, that's just an extra step that your players might have to take, and getting that all set up, you know, ease of access type situation where, again, just having it all in maps just eliminates that whole step.
That's true, and I have had that problem while running a game and asking people to install Beyond 20. Some people aren't comfortable installing browser plugins. Some people aren't using Chrome or Firefox. Maybe they're using Safari or Edge. Plugin's not available for those platforms. That has to be explained. Yeah, just a lot less smooth. Another thing I liked a lot about D&D Beyond Maps is the intuitive grid sizing. When you upload your own map, you kind of have to tell it exactly how big a quote-unquote 5-foot square is in pixels. And to do that at Roll20, it's a little tricky. You got to do a little math and put numbers into a form. On D&D Beyond Maps, you visually size the thing by zooming in, zooming out until it fits their little square grid thing, and that works really smoothly, really nicely.
Yeah, it gives you an example of a token, and you can even resize the token if you don't want to stretch the map out, like maybe, you know, it's not the highest quality resolution or something like that. You can just opt into just drag the token and make the token bigger.
Yeah, that part of it's really nice.
And the best part about it is they're not adding any extra paywall to this. It comes with the master tier subscription service already. So if you're already subscribed to that, you already have access to it. There's nothing extra. It's $4.58 a month at this point, comparable to Roll20's Plus tier.
Yeah, it's not a bad deal. All right, so here are some of the disadvantages. And one of them that's really significant to me is that it's a little buggy. Granted, it's an alpha release, so I'm not mad at them. They're telling us it's alpha. We know there are going to be these issues, but it can be a showstopper. And in fact, I actually tried to use this on a start playing game where I've got people signing up for my game that I don't know from wherever they're from, and they couldn't get past that bug at all where they try to launch D&D Beyond maps, and it will not launch. It just keeps giving an error message. And they cleared cookies and tried different browsers and did everything they could. They simply couldn't get past that wall. That made me look bad in a potentially commercial game. That one happened to be a free preview game, but if those people had paid for that on startplaying.games, it might not be nice for them to have such a bumpy start.
Yeah. Yeah, as you said, it's very early alpha, and they're kind of rolling it out and letting us kind of test through the bugs and stuff like that, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm currently running it on Phandelver and Below, my campaign with some of my friends, and we haven't had as many problems. I mean, granted, it hasn't been completely smooth. We've had a couple page refreshes now and again and a couple of frozen maps and whatnot, but I haven't had anything, luckily, that bad yet. But that stuff, unfortunately, can occur with the early stages that it's in.
Yeah. But to be fair to D&D Beyond, that also happens on Roll20 from time to time. The freeze-ups, the people needing to reload.
Yeah.
As long as they can get in, that part's not so bad.
And another big one that I didn't necessarily care for is you can't just arbitrarily create a random token. Like you can put all of your player tokens in there and all your monster tokens, as we showed earlier, that are in the database already. So if you can look it up on D&D Beyond, it is on maps, which is cool. But say you just need like a bartender or a quick, town crier or something like that that's not significant to the story. You can't just go about, right click and create token, add a picture in there real quick, give it a name. I've had to substitute in, just human fighter or something along those lines, just basic character, and kind of just tell my characters like, hey, this is the bartender, bear with me. It's a feature that's not in there yet. I'm sure it'll come out at some point. A little way you can get around it is what I did, because Gundren, one of the main characters in the Phandelver and Below module, he is pretty important, so he's going to show up quite a bit. So I made a character for him, and I put him as a non-active player character. So now, in the few times that I've needed him so far, I just looked through my character tokens and popped him up. And I've done a couple other characters like that. Sildar, he actually shows up in the database, so that one's pretty easy to solve. But yeah, like bartenders and just random NPCs, you have to kind of get a little creative to make them right now.
Yeah, and for townsfolk, you do have the average person type of templates in the monster manual. You could drag in, there's noble versus, I don't know what they call it, peasant or serf, things like that. But it's still a little clumsy. And what are you going to do with those homebrew monsters you made, or monsters you get from other supplements, like the Tome of Beasts is one that I like a lot. That's not direct D&D content.
Right.
It's third party. So then I have to stop and think about not what picture looks like it, but I have to go through a mental exercise of, what conventional monster looks like it, which is kind of harder to do.
And then also, like, if you have a bunch of NPCs and they all have different things to say, say there's a couple of NPCs in the tavern that have different bits of information, that's just less memory that I have to do of like, the guy that's sitting over here knows this, and the guy that's sitting over here knows this. I can just name them, and then when I look at the module, like, oh yeah, he knows this kind of thing. So it's a little less scrambly. Again, it's very much a convenience issue, but...
And these were our medium level disadvantages that we found with it. One that didn't seem like a big deal to me at first, but I started to really not like, there's no snap to grid. When you move tokens around, they move freely, so you have to be careful to place them inside of a grid for it to be really clear what space they're in.
There is no dynamic lighting in maps yet. I don't know if it's a feature that they plan on bringing. I don't remember them mentioning it yet. But if you have played Roll20, they do have a pretty standard feature now, especially if you buy the adventure modules, where you can easily tell line of sight by the dynamic lighting in there. It'll actually show shadows and stuff like that, and then also just kind of add to the immersion of it. Like if there's a fire going or something like that, it'll add light to it. There's nothing of the sort in maps right now. They do have a fog of war system that you can kind of do a little bit with. It's just not active.
Another thing that we thought of as a medium level disadvantage is that maps will not be available for all existing modules that have already been published. There's a certain number of them that they've gone ahead and done a maps treatment for. I don't think they've said whether or not they plan to do it for all of the back catalog or not, but for sure currently it's only there for the ones that it's there for. It will be there for new ones going forward for every single new adventure module that's coming out, though.
Yeah, and there is always an option to go in and manually import everything yourself. That's like, I honestly didn't know that. I'm pretty sure Phandelver and Below is already on there, but I went through and imported everything myself because I didn't explore enough before I started playing with it. So yeah, there's always that option. You can always go in and save all the maps from D&D Beyond modules and just upload them straight into it and kind of do your own thing with it. It's a little more work, but if there's an adventure that you really, really want to run that's not on there, you still have the option to do it.
Yes, that's true. You can still roll your own. And then there's the things that we thought were minor, but worth mentioning. One of them is that speaking of the custom map uploader, it does not take TIFF files. I think it's JPEGs and PNGs. I believe it also does PNGs.
Yeah.
But that may not sound like a big deal, but there are a lot of third-party D&D modules you can buy that only supply you the TIFF file. It's a little annoying to have to convert that into JPEG and then import it, but not that bad, I guess.
So another one, it may be minor, maybe major disadvantage is that this is made for D&D. Like it's integrated with D&D Beyond, so obviously it's going to be very oriented around that, whereas other VTTs do have support for other systems, like Pathfinder, Starfinder, Cthulhu, Vampire the Masquerade, stuff like that. You can all it's already kind of set up for it, whereas this one is exclusively going to be D&D. But not to say you couldn't kind of get around that with some ingenuity, but it is very much going to be a one system type thing.
True. Another minor disadvantage as we saw it is that anybody can move any token. In Roll20, which is the one I know best, again, and I assume probably in other VTTs as well, a player is assigned to a token. The player has control of only that token. In D&D Beyond Maps, the player, I think, can even grab a monster and move it around if they want to.
Yes.
Not such a big deal because you ask them to stop, and if they don't stop, you've got a deeper problem than your VTT of choice. You've got a player problem. But it'd be nice to have it a little smoother.
Yeah, you'll have the funny, somebody grabs somebody else's character and flings them off the map kind of thing. But, after a couple of ha-has, if they don't stop, you're going to have a conversation with them about don't do that.
Yeah, and at that point, I don't think it's a D&D Beyond problem anymore. It's
correct.
It's a player problem.
Yeah, there's nothing stopping somebody from flicking a model on the table. So
that's true, and I've had players do that.
But yeah, eventually they might correct that. But if they don't, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, true enough, and that's why it's minor. Mm-hmm. And finally, something I noticed is that the map has to have its own grid lines already on it. Again, this isn't a problem for the D&D Beyond maps that are already supplied from content you buy directly from D&D Beyond. But again, if you like third-party modules like I do, some of them don't come with those lines because they're designed for other VTTs that do put the lines right on top of it. It looks bad if you've got dual lines that are off by 1 pixel or half a virtual pixel or whatever. But fairly minor. You can take one of those maps and drop it into Photoshop or something like that and just put grid lines on it pretty easily.
There's also a ton of resources online to find already provided grids or maps with grids on them, sorry.
All right, let's move on to our final takes, and here's mine. I like the promise of this a lot. I especially like the idea of getting the discount I get for the big bundle I bought years ago. It gives me a permanent 8% discount, or as permanent as until they decide to keep doing it. And so I can get things a little bit cheaper on Beyond than I can on, say, Roll20. So I would love to be able to switch to it right now, but the reality is that, yeah, it is an alpha version and it has the problems of an alpha version. I can't really use it for paid ticketed games like on Start Playing because I can't guarantee that my players will be able to get in there quickly and hit the ground running.
Right.
We're more likely to be able to do that in Roll20.
Yeah.
Roll20 has occasional problems, but I've never experienced that we just can't get the game going thing with it.
Right.
So that's going to prevent me from bumping it up to my main tool right away. I do, though, like that it's more theater of mind. I personally am a little old school. I like the flat map. I like the stripped back tokens. I want all of us to be imagining this in our minds the way we imagine a novel when we're reading a novel. We get to think about what it looks like, and we get to be, more importantly, mentally immersed by being cooperatively creative in that way. Even just by using our imaginations passively, we're cooperating in the creativity a little more than if we have this full-blown 3D video game-looking VTT like they're developing. And I have to admit, I'm also enough of a crusty old-school grognard guy that I worry that people will approach D&D even more like a video game. If that 3D VTT tool gets really popular, it'll start to maybe mentally associate D&D with video games even more than people already do that. And so everything's going to be maybe like a Baldur's Gate video game in their head. And, you know, they'll constantly take the piss out of the scene you're trying to create as a DM. And they'll want to know where the treasure is. And they'll want to power game it all the way through. And things that I think maybe are antithetical to the best experience of a tabletop game as I see it.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with playing that way. I'm not saying that you should not play smash and grab games if that's what you enjoy. I just hope that there's enough of a following left for the type of game that I like to run and play. And so when I see things like the video game like VTT come up, I cringe a little bit just because I hope it doesn't become the dominant mode that people always expect. So it's nice to see them going with a theater of mind option at the same time that they're developing the other thing. And as I said, I do expect things to improve. It's we've said it a million times. It's an alpha product. It's cool that they are making it available and allowing us to test it along with them. I have hopes for it. I'm going to keep my eye on it. But for now, Roll20 is a more mature, smoother tool that I know how to use, that has the built-in dynamic lighting. And other than my discount for my big, crazy, expensive purchase on D&D Beyond years ago, they are the same price. The modules are priced exactly the same because it's Wizards of the Coast, actually, that publishes them on the marketplace for Roll20. So the prices match.
Right.
And the content matches. They even have the text content for the adventure modules. The entire book is in there if you get it, so it's just like buying it on D&D Beyond.
Right.
So for now, I'd say I'm sticking with Roll20, but I'll keep my eye on it.
Yeah. I, however, am going to stick around and keep on testing it. My players have enjoyed it thoroughly. They were actually pleasantly surprised that we were using a VTT at all. They kind of just expected a theater of mind only Discord session, which nothing wrong with that, but I like to have some visuals myself, even just for organization purposes. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Yeah, it is buggy. It is early alpha, but I'm patient. So just the fact that we kind of get along to test it along with them is pretty cool, you know. So to say like, oh yeah, I ran one of the first modules out of that thing, you know, just kind of the ground floor mentality of it. So I haven't used Roll20 in years, so when I was preparing for this module, I was kind of like, oh man, I got to relearn so much stuff and kind of get myself up to speed. And then it happened to be great timing where maps showed up on the front page one day, and I'm like, oh, what is that? And I kind of just dove deep into it. I mean, it's pretty shallow, so it wasn't a necessarily deep dive, but yeah, it's enjoyable. My players don't really know anything else. This is their first campaign, so I guess they don't really have anything to compare it to, which is, I guess, a positive, aside from all of the bugs. And I also happened to buy the bundle of books. I didn't buy all the adventure modules, but I did buy all of the source books a couple years ago. So I'm kind of up to speed, and having to rebuy them on Roll20 again would be a little feels bad. So I'm gonna stick with the cheaper option right now, I guess.
That makes sense. So that's D&D Beyond Maps. If you've given it a try, leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought. Let us know what you think about other VTTs. What's your favorite? What do you like about using it? If you like this video, click it to say so, and also throw us a subscribe if you would be so kind. Until next time, may all your 20s be natural.